You have 1 week to vacate, my twin brother said, swirling his wine like it was just another tasting. Our parents stayed quiet on the vineyard porch. I slid over the ownership papers. Actually, you all have 48 hours. Their glasses clinked in the silence when I was still working on my second cup of coffee when Vincent dropped the bomb. We were sitting in the sunlit patio of the vineyard's lodge, plates of scrambled eggs and fresh berries spread out on the long wooden table. My mother, in her floppy straw hat, was chattering about her latest blog post on Tuscan Hill towns. My father sipped his wine like it was just another day. But Vincent, he had that smirk on his face, the one I hadn't seen in years. Darius, he said, his voice smooth as the Chardonnay he was swirling. I'm going to need you to pack up and leave the property by the end of the week. I blinked, half convinced I'd misheard him. What the hell are you talking about, Vincent? He leaned back in his chair, one leg crossed over the other. It's simple. You've done your part. The vineyard's back on its feet. Now it's time for me to take over. My heart thudded in my chest, but my mother didn't even flinch. She just picked up her fork and went back to her eggs like this was normal. You can't be serious, I said, my voice low. This is my home. My work. You can't just kick me out. Vincent smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I can. And I will. He reached into a leather folder and slid out a stack of papers, setting them in front of me. I've got the legal documents to prove it. I stared at the papers. My name. My parents' signatures. Also official. But I knew better. I had lived and breathed this land for nearly a decade. I wasn't going to let him take it away. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to say something. Anything. My father just sipped his wine. My mother wouldn't even meet my eyes. I laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. You're both okay with this? After everything I've done for this place? No answer. Just the soft clink of cutlery and the distant cry of seagulls over the lake. I took a deep breath, feeling the anger burn in my gut. You want to play this game, Vincent? Fine. Let's play. I reached into my own folder, the one I'd kept in my office for years. Ownership records. Tax filings. Every damn paper proving that the vineyard was mine. I spread them out across the table. Here's the truth, I said, my voice shaking with fury. The vineyard is legally in my name. You might have some fancy documents, but they're worthless compared to this. Vincent's smirk faltered for just a second. My father finally looked up, his expression blank. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. You can't do this, Vincent said, his voice suddenly tight. I already did, I said, standing up and gathering my papers. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. I saved this place from ruin. I sacrificed everything for it. And I'm not going to let you steal it from me. I turned and walked away from the table, my heart pounding. Behind me, I heard Vincent curse under his breath and my father mutter something I couldn't catch. My mother said nothing at all. The morning sun glinted off the lake as I stepped back inside the main house. I knew this was just the beginning, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I couldn't sleep that night. The images kept flashing through my mind. Vincent's smug face, my parents' empty silence, the lake shimmering in the morning light while my world fell apart. I sat in the old camper I still called home, the one parked near the east slope where the oldest vines grew, and let the memories come flooding back. I was 24 when I gave up everything for this place. Back then, the vineyard was just a dying dream. My father had fallen from a ladder while pruning the trellises, breaking his leg and, for a while, his spirit too. Vincent had already left by then. He said there was more money in imports and that he wasn't cut out for the backbreaking work. I didn't blame him then. I figured someone had to stay. So I stayed. I moved into the camper, thinking it would be temporary. I'd fix the irrigation lines, clean up the books, maybe sell a few barrels and get the place back on its feet. But temporary turned into years. The days bled together, dawn to dusk, 12-hour stretches in the fields, my hands blistered and my back permanently sore. I missed my old life more than I wanted to admit. Before the accident, I'd been chasing a different dream, painting. My studio in Santa Barbara had been my sanctuary, a place where I could pour out every color and feeling I had. But I gave that up when I came home. I packed away the brushes and moved into the camper. I told myself the vines were just another canvas. I thought about those early days as I sat in the camper that night. The smell of the fields in summer, the ache in my arms after pulling weeds and hammering in new posts. The drought came not long after I took over, stretching everything thin. I spent nights patching up old barrels, days negotiating with the bank for another loan, anything to keep the place afloat. Vincent, meanwhile, was sending postcards from Argentina and Paris, always with some new label, some fancy tasting room he was promoting. I'd read them by the dim light of the camper, feeling equal parts angry and hollow. He said he was building connections. I was building the vineyard back from the dead. What stung the most was that my parents didn't seem to notice the difference. They'd send out newsletters about their travels, always sunny shots of beaches and bustling cities, like the vineyard wasn't their home anymore, just another stop on their endless tour. But when I showed them the books, the hard numbers that proved we were finally turning a profit, They still smiled like it was just a fluke. Like I was still just the kid in high school who couldn't finish a project on time. I took a slow breath and pulled out the folder with the notarized transfer papers. I kept it close, even back then. My parents had signed it willingly when the drought was at its worst. They said I had a better head for business than they ever did. Back then, I believed them. I thought I'd finally earned my place here. I remember the day they signed. My father's hand had trembled just a bit, and my mother had kept her eyes on the floor. But they signed. And I spent the next 7 years proving that I was the right man for the job. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of the camper. The wind rattled the thin walls, and for a moment, I could almost hear the vines outside whispering in the dark. All those years I poured into this land, watching the grapes turn from tight green beads to plump purple clusters, pressing them into barrels and waiting for the magic to happen. It was backbreaking work, lonely work, but I did it because it mattered, because it was my family's legacy. And tonight, I realized it was also mine. I turned off the lamp and let the darkness settle around me. My phone buzzed once, an email from a supplier, nothing urgent. I put it down and closed my eyes. They'd all forgotten how much I gave up to keep this place alive. But I hadn't. And if Vincent wanted a fight, I was ready. I'd already given up everything else for this vineyard. I wasn't about to give it up now. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a knot in my stomach. I didn't bother with breakfast. I had work to do. I pulled on my old boots and went straight to the main house. The air was cool and damp, the kind that hinted at rain, but I didn't care. I had one goal: find the papers and prove once and for all that this was my vineyard. I unlocked the old wooden door of my office and stepped inside. The room smelled like dust and cork, like every late night I'd spent here poring over invoices and crop projections. I opened the bottom drawer of my battered filing cabinet and started pulling out folders. Tax records, deeds, bills for fertilizer and labor, years of paper trails that told the real story of who had kept this place alive. Halfway through, I found what I was looking for: the original notarized transfer papers. My hands were shaking as I flipped through them. My parents' signatures, witness signatures, the official seal, all there, all real. For a second, I just stood there staring at them, feeling a mix of anger and relief. I hadn't made it all up. I wasn't crazy. This land was mine, by law and by blood. I called my lawyer, Bill, who had been my one steady ally through years of uncertainty. His calm voice steadied me as he confirmed what I already knew. "Everything's in order, Darius," he said. "They can't just kick you out. Those transfer papers are ironclad." "Good," I said, though my voice was tight. "Because I'm done playing defense." Bill was quiet for a second. "You realize this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing, right? Vincent didn't just decide this yesterday. This was planned. Coordinated." The words settled into my gut like a stone. I thought back to Vincent's calm expression at brunch, to the way my parents had stared at their plates. None of it had been an accident. They'd been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. Behind my back. In my own home. I felt a flash of something close to grief. I'd known Vincent, and I didn't always see eye to eye, but I never imagined he'd stoop this low. And my parents, retired travel bloggers, world adventurers, they'd never lifted a finger to stop him. Maybe they'd always seen me as the stand-in, the caretaker who'd do the dirty work while they wandered. Maybe that's all I'd ever been to them. I pushed the thoughts away and focused on the task at hand. I spent the next few hours drafting an eviction notice. I'd never done something like this before, but Bill talked me through every step. My hands trembled when I signed the last page, but my resolve didn't waver. When I was done, I looked around the office. The walls were lined with harvest photos: me, Vincent, our parents. All those years of family dinners and harvest festivals. My father laughing with a glass of Merlot. My mother holding a basket of grapes. Vincent smirking in his designer boots, pretending to care. None of it mattered now. I stood up and folded the eviction notice carefully. My pulse was pounding in my ears as I slipped it into a manila envelope. This wasn't just paperwork. It was a line in the sand. As I walked back to the camper, the vineyard was quiet. Rows of early summer leaves rustled in the breeze, and the lake shimmered in the distance. It all looked so peaceful, like nothing had changed. But everything had. I stopped at the edge of the property, staring down the long rows of vines I'd fought so hard to keep alive. My father once told me the land remembers the hands that tend it. I hoped that was true. Because today, those hands were mine. I tucked the envelope under my arm and took a deep breath. Tomorrow, I would deliver it. And tomorrow, I would make sure they all understood. I wasn't just the caretaker. I was the owner. I didn't bother knocking when I stepped into the main villa. The heavy wooden doors swung shut behind me with a soft thud that felt final, like I'd crossed a line I could never go back over. They were all there. Vincent lounged in one of the old leather armchairs by the fireplace, swirling a glass of Cabernet like he didn't have a care in the world. My father sat beside him, staring out the window at the vineyard, lost in thought. My mother was perched on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes darting up to meet mine for just a second before dropping back to the floor. I cleared my throat, the manila envelope tucked under my arm. I have something for you. Vincent raised an eyebrow. Oh? Let me guess, more excuses. I didn't answer. I walked to the coffee table and set the envelope down gently. It's an eviction notice. You all have 48 hours to leave. Silence. Vincent let out a low laugh. Eviction? You're joking, right? I'm not, I said evenly. The vineyard is legally mine. You tried to push me out of my own home. I'm done playing nice. My father shifted in his seat, his expression hard to read. My mother looked like she wanted to say something, but she stayed silent. Vincent leaned forward, his smirk gone. You really think you can just erase us? You think some papers mean you're the only one who belongs here? I took a slow breath. No, Vincent. I think years of blood and sweat and sacrifice mean I belong here. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who saved this place while you were off chasing deals and pretending you cared. He scoffed, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, fear, maybe, or at least the realization that this wasn't a bluff. I turned to my parents. I lived in a camper on this land for 7 years. 7 years of 12-hour days, of hauling water during the drought, of fixing the damn irrigation lines when no one else would. I gave up my art, my life, everything for this vineyard. And you sat back and watched. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Darius. I just wanted peace. Peace. My voice cracked as I said it. You think siding with Vincent was peace? Watching me work myself into the ground while he took credit for everything? That's not peace. That's cowardice. My father shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Son, we thought. No, I said sharply. You didn't think at all. You let Vincent come back here and act like he owned the place. You let him walk all over me because it was easier than admitting you gave it all up a long time ago. Vincent stood abruptly, his face red with anger. This is bullshit, Darius. You're just bitter because you never made it anywhere else. You're nothing but a glorified farmer, clinging to the one thing that gives you any worth. I felt the words like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. You're right, I said quietly. This is the one thing that gives me worth. Because I made it. I kept it alive. And I won't let you or anyone else take it from me. Vincent opened his mouth to say something else, but I cut him off. 48 hours, I repeated, my voice steady. After that, I'll have you removed by force if I have to. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that settles in your bones. My father stood up slowly and walked out without a word, his shoulders hunched like he'd aged 20 years in an instant. Vincent glared at me one last time, then stormed past me and out the door. The echo of his footsteps in the hallway felt like a final crack in the foundation of our family. My mother stayed seated, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She looked at me and whispered, I just wanted peace. I swallowed hard. I know. But there's no peace in pretending anymore. She nodded once, her hands trembling in her lap. And for a moment, we just sat there, the weight of everything unsaid hanging in the air between us. When I left the villa, the sun was setting over the lake, painting the sky in streaks of orange and red. I knew nothing would ever be the same. But as I stepped out onto the gravel courtyard, I felt something close to relief. This was my land, my fight, and I wasn't going to back down. The next morning, I got up before dawn. My boots crunched over the gravel as I walked the property line, the sky turning soft shades of pink and gold over the lake. I felt like a ghost drifting through a place I'd spent my whole life trying to save. But today, for the first time, it felt like it really was mine. By mid-morning, I'd already changed all the locks. I installed security cameras at the front gate, at the barn, and at the main villa. I knew it might seem like overkill, but after everything that had happened, I wasn't going to take any chances. I watched from the courtyard as Vincent loaded his Range Rover with suitcases. He slammed the trunk shut with a force that rattled the windows of the villa. He didn't look at me, but I could see the tension in the set of his shoulders, the way his jaw was clenched tight. You think this makes you some kind of hero? He said finally, his voice low and bitter. You're nothing, Darius. Just a bitter man playing landlord. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. My father came next, a single battered suitcase in hand. He avoided my gaze, his eyes fixed on the ground as he walked to his old truck. He didn't say goodbye. He just opened the door, threw his bag in the back, and drove away without a backward glance. My mother was the last to leave. She moved slowly, her small frame looking even smaller in the morning light. She paused at the edge of the courtyard, glancing back at me one last time. Her lips trembled, but she didn't say a word. Then she got in the car and drove off. I stood there until the dust from the tires settled. The only sound was the soft rustle of the vines in the breeze. It was done. They were gone. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stood in the gravel, feeling the weight of everything settle in my chest. My hands were shaking, but I let them. The anger, the heartbreak, the relief, it all rolled together until I couldn't tell one from the other. I walked back to the main house and unlocked the front door. The villa felt empty now, like a hollow shell echoing with the ghosts of a family that had never really been whole. but it was also peaceful. The kind of peace I hadn't known in years. I took out a clean notebook and wrote the first entry in what I decided would be a new ledger. Not a list of debts or yields or profit margins. Just a list of boundaries, my own. What I would allow. What I would protect. What I would never let anyone take from me again. I paused at the window, looking out at the rows of vines stretching toward the lake. They looked the same as they always had, but today, they felt different. Heavier maybe, but also more real. I walked outside and leaned against the wooden railing. The sun was fully up now, warm on my face. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. No more Vincent. No more silent complicity from my parents. No more fighting for scraps of love from people who had never really seen me. This was mine. As I turned back to the house, I realized I was alone, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. It didn't take long for word to spread through the small community. In places like this, where everyone knew your family name and your harvest schedule, gossip was as much a part of the soil as the vines themselves. By the end of the week, I could feel the stares. Old partners who'd once shaken my hand and called me a visionary now looked at me like I was a villain. Cousins who never lifted a finger to help at harvest dinners sent snide messages. I heard what you did to your parents. Cold, man. Even people I barely knew felt the need to chime in, offering opinions I hadn't asked for. I didn't respond to any of them. Let them think what they wanted. I threw myself into the vineyard. I doubled the hours I spent in the fields, pruning back wild shoots, checking irrigation lines, running my hands through the dirt like I could still find comfort in it. The vines didn't judge. They didn't gossip. They just kept growing. I decided to rebrand the vineyard, too. I had been playing it safe for too long, using the same label design my father had picked in the 70s. A dusty script, a faded family crest that didn't mean much anymore. I wanted something different, something that felt like mine. I spent long nights at the big farmhouse table, sketching out ideas. In the end, I called the new label Resurgence. It felt right, like the first real harvest after a long winter. I hired a small marketing firm from Sonoma to help me design the label. They didn't care about the family drama. They just saw the quality of the wine and the promise of something new. That was all I wanted. One rainy afternoon, I received a letter in the mailbox. No return address, just my mother's looping handwriting on the envelope. My heart thumped as I tore it open. It wasn't an apology. Not really. Just a few lines in her careful script, telling me how she and my father had found a small place upstate. I hope you can find some peace now, she wrote. Like it was that simple. Like I hadn't already built my life around the hope that they'd see me, just once. I didn't write back. I took the letter and slid it into a drawer, letting the words fade with time. Maybe one day I'd forgive them. Or maybe not. I didn't know yet. But I did know one thing. I wouldn't let them or Vincent rewrite the story of this place. I was done being the quiet son who did all the work while someone else took the credit. Done letting other people decide what my life should look like. I spent that winter planning the next steps, more direct-to-consumer sales, local tastings, even a new online store. I hired a small team who believed in the vineyard, not the family name. I learned to trust them slowly, to share what I had built. Some nights, the loneliness was a dull ache, like an old injury that flared up whenever I let myself think too much. But even on those nights, I knew I'd made the right choice. The gossip would fade. The stares would stop. And in the meantime, I still had my vines, my wine, and the quiet promise of something better. This was my vineyard now. My story. And for the first time, that was enough. Winter gave way to spring in a slow, measured thaw. The days grew longer, the cold winds softened, and the vines began to bud again, tiny green shoots that felt like hope made real. I took it all in with a kind of quiet reverence, letting the rhythm of the seasons wash over me like a balm. I didn't waste time dwelling on the past. I had too much to do. I repurposed the old wine cellar, once just a dusty storage room, into something new. I scrubbed the stone walls until they gleamed, replaced the flickering bulbs with warm pendant lights, and turned it into a space that felt both raw and refined, part art studio, part guest tasting room. The first time I walked through the finished space, my heart gave a little kick. It was everything I'd always wanted, proof that I could shape this place into something of my own. I let the idea of a new brand, Resurgence, spill over into everything I touched. A new website, bold labels that felt fresh and real, not stuck in the past. I reached out to local restaurants, even small shops that had never stocked our wine before. I wasn't just selling a product. I was selling the story of a vineyard that had been reborn. I didn't try to do it all alone, either. I hired a small team, people who understood what I was trying to build, who didn't care about the gossip or the family drama. Marco, a young vineyard manager with a head for sustainable practices. Lila, who handled the marketing like it was second nature. Even Jonas, an old friend from college, came back to help me with the books. Together, we made something that felt real and honest and mine. On Christmas Eve, I found myself alone in the main house. The family photos were gone from the mantle, replaced by simple frames with sketches of the vines and the hills. The silence was thick, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like freedom. I walked through the rows of dormant vines as dusk settled in, my breath turning to fog in the cold air. I paused at the edge of the lake, where the water was as still as glass. No calls came. No messages. The world was quiet, and I realized that was okay. I went back inside and built a fire in the big stone hearth. The crackle and pop of the flames filled the empty room, warm and alive. I opened a bottle of the new vintage, my vintage, and poured a glass. I raised it to the flickering light and whispered, to starting over. The first sip tasted like possibility, rich and full and more alive than anything I'd known before. I leaned back in the worn armchair and let the heat of the fire soak into my bones. No more expectations. No more silent resentments. Just this, my vineyard, my rules, my future. The world outside might still see me as the quiet one, the one who played peacemaker while everyone else took what they wanted. But I knew the truth now. I wasn't just surviving. I was rebuilding, reclaiming, reinventing. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.